How history shaped Kazakhstan into becoming an energy giant. Kazakhstan produces more than 90 million tons of crude oil every year and ranks among the world's top 15 oil-producing countries. It is also one of the largest coal producers in Eurasia and a major electricity exporter in Central Asia. But this energy system was not built after independence. It was designed decades earlier, as part of a much larger project, the Soviet energy system. To understand Kazakhstan's energy sector today, we first need to understand how it was built. In this video, we explore how energy shaped Kazakhstan's past, from Soviet central planning to the infrastructure that still defines the country's role in regional energy today. Kazakhstan's role in the Soviet energy system was shaped by geography. It is the largest country in Central Asia, with endless open lands, rich mineral deposits, and direct access to the Caspian Basin. Beneath its territory lie enormous energy resources: coal in central Kazakhstan, oil and gas in the west, and space for large-scale industrial infrastructure. For Soviet planners, Kazakhstan was not a peripheral republic. It was a strategic production base. The backbone of Kazakhstan's early energy role was coal. The Karaganda coal basin, first developed in the early 1930s, became one of the three largest coal-producing regions in the Soviet Union, alongside the Donbass Basin, developed since the late 18th century, and Kuznetsk, expanded rapidly during Soviet industrialization in the 1930s. Karaganda became the third pillar of the Soviet coal system. By the 1950s, Kazakhstan was producing tens of millions of tons of coal annually, supplying fuel to power plants, steel mills, and heavy industry across the Soviet economy. Coal-fired power plants were deliberately built next to mines, reducing transport costs and maximizing industrial output. This mine-to-plant model became the foundation of Kazakhstan's electricity system, a structure that, remarkably, still exists today. While coal dominated early Soviet planning, oil and gas fundamentally transformed Kazakhstan's role in the energy system. Large-scale oil exploration expanded in western Kazakhstan after World War II, particularly in the Caspian Basin and the Mangostar region. By the 1970s, these fields were recognized as strategically important for supplementing declining production in older Soviet oil provinces. The discovery of Tengiz in 1979 marked a turning point. It would later become one of the largest oil fields ever discovered in the Soviet Union, with recoverable reserves estimated in the billions of barrels. However, most infrastructure was designed to move oil outward, toward refineries and markets elsewhere in the Soviet system. Kazakhstan was becoming an energy producer for the Union as a whole, not primarily for domestic consumption. Electricity generation in Soviet Kazakhstan followed one clear logic: support heavy industry. By the 1960s and 1970s, large coal-fired power plants were built to serve mining, metallurgy, and industrial cities such as Karaganda and Ekibastuz. Residential demand was secondary. Energy efficiency was secondary. Local flexibility was secondary. What mattered was scale and reliability for industrial output. This industrial-first design allowed rapid economic expansion, but it also locked the system into large, centralized power plants, a feature that would later become a major structural weakness. Kazakhstan's energy system was never designed to operate independently. It was part of a single, centrally managed Soviet power grid, where electricity and fuel flowed across republican borders without restriction. By the late Soviet period, Kazakhstan was both importing and exporting electricity depending on seasonal demand and central planning decisions. Fuel was transported across thousands of kilometers, with little consideration for future national boundaries. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the physical grid remained, but the political and economic coordination disappeared almost overnight. When Kazakhstan became independent in 1991, it did not start from zero. It inherited one of the largest energy systems in Central Asia. At the time, the country had around 20 gigawatts of installed power generation capacity, most of it coming from large, coal-fired power plants built during the Soviet period. Kazakhstan was also a major coal producer. Annual coal output stood at around 130 million tons, making the country one of the largest coal suppliers in the former Soviet Union. Oil production existed, but it was still limited. In 1991, Kazakhstan was producing roughly 25 to 30 million tons of oil per year, even though some of its largest oil fields had already been discovered. Natural gas production was smaller still. Output was about 7 to 8 billion cubic meters per year, with much of the system designed for export rather than domestic use. In other words, Kazakhstan inherited scale, large power plants, large mines, and large resource potential, but not an energy system designed for flexibility or efficiency. Kazakhstan had energy abundance, but not energy efficiency and not energy resilience. Much of Kazakhstan's current energy debate can be traced directly to this Soviet legacy. Coal still accounts for the majority of electricity generation, despite growing pressure to reduce emissions. Oil and gas exports remain central to government revenues and foreign policy strategy. Large, centralized power plants continue to dominate the grid, shaping both investment decisions and reform challenges. The past never disappeared. It adapted and continues to shape the present. To understand Kazakhstan's energy challenges today, from aging infrastructure to the pressure for energy transition, we first had to understand how its system was built. In the next video, we'll explore Kazakhstan's energy system today, its strengths, weaknesses, and contradictions. Subscribe to Powering Central Asia if you want to understand energy beyond the headlines.